Social context of second language acquisition. In this chapter, we focus attention on two levels of context that affect language learning, in the microsocial and macrosocial. The microsocial deals with the potential effects of immediately surrounding circumstances, while the macrosocial focus relates SLE to broader cultural, political, and educational environment. Microsocial and microsocial deals with the effects of the surroundings in terms of language, and then macrosocial focus on second language acquisitions, which is cultural, political, and educational environment. Communicative competence. The concept of communicative competence became a basic tenet in the 10 emerging field of social linguistics, and was soon adopted as well by many specialists in the field of SLE and language teaching. So, ang kaning communicative competence is nagkuan na siya sa social linguistic, which is ang sooner na adapt siya sa daghan nga mga specialist, which is ang ilang field is SLE, second language acquisition. This term can be defined as simply as what a speaker needs to know to communicate appropriately within a particular language community, according to Savell Troika 2003. It involves knowing not only the vocabulary, phonology, grammar, and other aspects of linguistic structures, although what is critical component of knowledge, but also when to speak or not, and to say it whom and to say it appropriately in any given situation. So ang kaning communicative competence is nag-focus na siya sa rather nag-involve siya og vocabulary, phonology, grammar, og drapod gibasan kung kano sa ka mosultik or kung kano sa dili ana. And then, the term language community refers to a group of people who share knowledge of a common language. To at least people who share knowledge of a common language to at least some extent. So, kaning language community is mo ni sila is a group of people nga kanang ang ilang language is ipa-expand or kanang ilang i-share sa batag isa. Multilingualism individual are often members of more than one language community, generally to different degrees. One language different degrees, and they are oriented themselves to at any given moment. Differences between monolingual and multilingual communicative competence are done in part to the difference between learning language and learning culture. L1 learners for children use an integral part of their socialization into their native language community. Maybe language is normally part of her native culture, and thus part of the body language, attitude and skills which are transmitted from one generation to the next as well. L2 learning may be part of the second cultural learning and adaptation, but the relationship of SLE to social or cultural learning differs greatly with circumstances. Within the definition of communicative competence, then the content of what a speaker needs to know, as well as judgment of relative success in attaining that knowledge, depend on the social content with which he or she learns and is using the language. Macrosocial factors. Within a macrosocial focus, our first topic will be L2 variation. Microsocial factors within a microsocial focus, our first topic will be L2 variation, which has received extension attention since 1970s from SLE researchers concerned primarily with social linguistics. Explore how contextually dimensions relate to variation in learners' language and consider why differencing varieties of an L2 may be chosen as targets of SL11 within group are supposedly learning the same language. Variation in learners' language. Some of the variability is due to changes that occur in what learners know and can produce as they progressively achieve higher of L2 proficiency. One of the most important contributions of sociolinguistics, beginning with Labov 1965, has been demonstrated that much of what earlier linguistics had considered as systematically irregularity in language production can be seen to follow regular and predictable patterns when treated as variable features. These are multiple linguistic forms which are systemically or predictability used by different time. They occur in every linguistic level: vocabulary, phonology, morphology, syntax, discourse. They include both standards, correct, and non-standards opinion, and they are characterized of an natural language production, whether L2 or L1 or L2. For example, native speakers of English may say, "I ate dinner" or "I ate supper." Variable vocabulary: "She was coming" or "she was coming." Variable phonology. So, variable feature occurs in the production of any one speaker's native or language learners. Depends largely on the communication content. Some relevant contextual dimensions are linguistic context. Linguistic context elements are elements of language form and function associated with a variable element. For instance, the phonological variable n or ing in coming is more likely to be used before pause and a word which begins with the back consonant of before a pause, and the variable ing is coming and is more likely before a front consonant. Production of n most frequent in one syllable nouns such as ring or song, and in the progressive B forms of verbs. Psychological context. The factors associated with the amount of attention which is being given to language form during production, the level of automatically versus in control in processing, or the intellectual demands of the particular task. Similarly, the variable in is more likely to be used by L2 or rather L1 or L2 when they are focusing on their pronunciation in a formal setting than in a casual conversation. Microsocial context. Features is setting or situation and interaction which relate to communicative events within which language is being produced, interpreted, and negotiated. This includes level of formality and participants' relationship to one another and whether the interaction with the public are intimate. The macro-social factors may influence linguistic variation. This includes features of the larger political setting aligned with language learning and use takes place, including the social position and role of users, whether immigrants, international student, visiting dignitary. Variation that occurs in different contexts at a single point in time is of more interest from a social perspective. Research in social context of second language acquisition. In one study, Adamson and Riga 1991 examined the pronunciation of ing in Cambodian and Vietnamese immigrants in the Washington, D.C. area. Native English-speaking men tend to pronounce ing as n, whereas native women are less likely to do so, perhaps because women tend to be more status conscious and want to use the more prestigious form, while the Cambodian and Vietnamese immigrants produce less and the native speakers overall. There is still a gender division with males producing in more often than females. Adamson and Regan hypothesis that the Cambodian and Vietnamese immigrants males are unconsciously attempting to sound more like native-speaking men. Adamson, H.D. and Regan v. 1991, the acquisition of community speech norms by Asian immigrants learning English as a second language, a primary studies in second language acquisition.